good evening and welcome. This is PM Express. Well, if you do recall, on the 12th of May 2014, a number of issues were discussed as far as Ghana's economy is concerned at Senchi. And of course, we talked about the economy. But policymakers gathered a non-partisan discussion. Several arguments were raised and solutions were provided. But months down the line, has there been any effort to ensure that these solutions are used to dealing with the current economic situation or the current economic crisis the country finds itself in? Tonight on PM Express, we'll find out exactly what next after the Senchi consensus. My name is Prince Mika, and you're welcome. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on PM Express here on Joy News on Multi TV. And tonight we're reviewing the National Economic Forum, which took place at Senchi, and we're juxtaposing it as against the numerous economic challenges, whether perceived or real. We'll find out that the country is facing at this particular moment. I mean, you can talk about the fuel shortage in the country. You can talk about the numerous threat of strike actions, and many more that we can talk about here. But remember to be a part of the program. Join us on our various social networking platforms, and we'll be glad to share your thoughts with the rest of the world. Let's start the discussion from a political perspective, though. But I'll tell you our guest tonight. We're joined in the studio by Sydney Casely-Hayford. He's a financial analyst. Sydney, welcome.
Good evening. How are you?
I am doing great. And also Gilbert Ibrahim, seated to my far left there. He's an economist. Good evening to you, Gilbert.
Good evening.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Right. And on the phone lines now is David Agbe. He's the executive director for the Ghana Institute and Ghana Institute of Politics and Governance. Did I get that right, David?
No, it's Ghana Institute of Governance and Security.
All right. Thank you very much for that correction. Now, David, one would say that after the Senchi Economic Forum and of course, the consensus that came afterwards, expectations as per dealing with Ghana's economic challenges would have lessened and obviously would have seen some solutions. But that seemed not to be the case. What should be the posturing of government in, dealing with people's hopelessness at this particular moment?
Yes, thank you so much, Prince, for the opportunity, and my regards to Casely-Hayford and my other colleagues, economists. I think that with the issue of these consensus at the Senchi, I think that all the items that they've listed, the 22 items, I must say that they are all long-term policies that have been actually crafted, but we are yet to see a comprehensive one which actually articulates all the issues, and then we'll be able to see whether they will be able to reflect in the Ghanaian economy as we speak. But I must say also that coming from Senchi, some of the issues that was tabled, I think that Bank of Ghana has started the process. And so, first of all, we need to commend Bank of Ghana to actually bring the issue to the fore that they are going to make sure that they issued a currency which is called the yuan, the Chinese currency, to make sure that they use it to stabilize this kind of imbalances between the dollar and other foreign currency. You realize that Ghana, our major trading partner, as we speak, is the Chinese government or China. I mean, if you monitor the system very well, 2012, you realize that Ghana was able to trade with China to the tune of almost about 5.4 billion, and the United States almost about 1.6 billion. And so it tells us clearly that our trading partners now is the Asian countries. And so the Asian countries are also the world emerging economy. And so our attention should be focused on the Asian countries, how we can build a solid partners with the Asian countries.
But David, there's a reality here. I mean, the reality here is that, look, even though that's the direction we're looking at in terms of trying to resuscitate the Ghana cedi, but the point is the cedi is still raising slowly against the US dollar, for that matter. We've not been able to deal with that particular challenge. So for those who are expecting a lot from government, what can government do?
Friends, I must say that everybody who has a basic, appreciation of economic management will say that all the issues that was actually tabled, the 22 points listed, it is a long-term policy, that a long-term, medium-term policy that will take a certain minimum of a reasonable period before it will get to maturity, where it will actually reflect in a Ghanaian economy. But the new one, which I think that if Bank of Ghana is able to implement, that will have a good reflection on the economy, is this yuan currency. If they are able to, let the yuan currency flow between all the banking institutions, where those people who will go to China will be able to have access to the yuan currency, where they will not, jam looking for dollar here and there, it will be able to actually ease the system. But as we see now, we've not seen those currencies being displayed, at the banks. And so that will be the immediate one that Bank of Ghana has to issue, so that it will actually reflect in those people who actually go to China and other emerging, countries, so that they can see that, yes, government is being proactive. But as you see it now, we've not seen those currencies flowing through the Ghanaian banks and the Ghanaian market. So that is the first point of call. But, the larger point is that it will take a bigger or a long term before all these policies could be materialized in our economy.
Very well. Thank you very much, David Agbe, for joining us here on PM Express. David Agbe is the Executive Director for Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. Let me go straight to you, Sydney. Listening to David, he talks of long-term measures. At least that should provide hope to many Ghanaians who are expecting some solutions after the Senchi economic dialogue. You were there. Would it be wrong, or would you fault anyone for expecting too much?
The expectations after the Senchi Forum were very, very high. And it was made higher because of the MPP's decision not to be there. So it kind of elevated the whole issue to a political plane. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm hiccups. Which is what it was before it started anyway. It wasn't the first economic forum that had ever been held. So there wasn't really a need to think about it as something new.
Right.
However, because of the situation in which we found ourselves from the economic management side, it was heightened, because everybody thought that the 140 participants who were invited would go and prescribe solutions to the country's woes and would come back, and a week later everything would be put in place and then it'll start alleviating. But I think it was generally a media hype expectation, and it didn't carry out that way.
And so that's to say that most of the solutions you preferred are obviously long-term ones, and it will be wrong for anyone to expect anything immediately.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. A lot of the solutions were also short to medium term. And some of the things that were recommended were to stop doing certain things, to try and slow down doing certain things, to find alternatives which were suggested, and then, of course, the long-term structural alignment of the economy. So there were items in there that if government acted upon and stopped it, it would yield, at least there would be an immediate impact. Of course, the most significant thing at the time when we were at Senchi was the depreciating cedi. And so there was a lot of emphasis on what are we going to do, and what should the central bank and the governor do about the currency. I was privileged to be in the same committee that Dr. Kofi Wampa was the central bank governor.
Right.
Finance Minister Seth Terkper was there as well with us, and a few other persons, past governors and past ministers of finance. It was chaired by Kwesi Botre. So we did delve into a lot of detail about issues that border on macroeconomic stability, which is what our group was tasked to do. So we came out with solutions that could easily be looked at as medium to long term, which was our side. Then there are other issues, persons who dealt with private sector matters, and there were labor issues to be addressed. So the various committees had different solutions, and we sifted out. We didn't go out saying we were going to come up with a 22-point communique. We listed the most important ones that we thought would impact what the economy was supposed to provide some solutions. But we left our committee tasking the governor, who pledged clearly that he would go back and he would assess the actions they had put in place since the beginning of February and see whether or not that had its desired effect. And if it had, then they would come out and they would rationalize the next steps. So he did so soon afterwards. And frankly, it was the most significant thing to do because it was at the top of the economic agenda and it was on the lips of everybody. It was one of those things that affected everybody. And so it was important that he addressed that. And I have to say that his comeback to the country was far more than I expected from him.
Right.
So I'm glad that we went beyond and we actually went a little further. And I think that the effect of it, as somebody told me yesterday, that they had actually reported that the CD had appreciated slightly against the dollar. I don't know the figures, so I'm saying it with a little trepidation, I'm not sure. But even if that were not so, clearly we have seen a certain a hold back in the slide of the depreciating CD. So that is good.
But in terms of revenue generation to deal with issues like the fuel shortage, for instance, where are the signs to show that something is being done?
I think that's a different matter because we did not discuss fuel issues.
As in revenue generation?
at Senchi. Well, I mean, we discussed revenue generation. The fact of the matter is government's revenue collection by the GRA is far short of budgeted expectations at this time. The first quarter period is down against budget, is lower than budget by about 1.6 billion CDs. That's a lot of money not to have to operate with. And government is probably coming to the new reality that its budget expectations were way beyond what it thought. We're coming to the end of June. There hasn't been anything significant put in place, which will make me even feel secure that the next quarter, the second quarter, which will end on the 30th of June, will be any better than the first quarter. And we have only half a year to go. Whatever measures you put in place today, you'll probably see the effect 6 to 9 months down the line. It can't just happen overnight. Of course, we have the obnoxious Act 870, which is the VAT on financial services tax, which is supposed to be put in place. And if that comes into place, it destroys just about everything that the central bank governor has actually put in place immediately, because now you're going to get people being very nervous about doing business with the banks and putting their money into the banks, because first of all, they don't understand what is being done. And then secondly, in everybody's mind, it's going to cost us money because there's going to be tax on the various things that the cash that we're spending. So it's not an implementable law. It is very, very tenuous and difficult to understand. And government has muddied the waters by talking about core issues and non-core issues as far as banking is concerned.
We'll get to that, but let me just quickly bring Gilbert in now. In as much as we talk about whether the signs are clear on the wall after the Senchi Economic Forum, do you see anything? I mean, just opposing it with the series of seeming crises that we're seeing in the country.
Yeah, looking at follows from the reports, we discussed it earlier. But then what I know is that most of the items, if you look at the core ones that fall within the work of the Bank of Ghana, they picked it and they're working on that. Some aspects fall within Ministry of Finance, this I know. they also work on it. And some aspect of the community will fall exactly within specific ministries like trade, other things. And I know that various groups are working on it. And I think he talked a lot about the Bank of Ghana,
right,
the governor issues. So obviously, the commitment of the managers of the economy to implement it, it's there, and definitely they pick it up. They will sit down at the various levels, look at those where it impacts most. Then an assessment is done. Then they now look at how the implementation would come.
But how do you equate that commitment to the expectations, to the current situation?
I think Sydney
yes.
The expectations were so high,
yes.
and I believe the media hype was also that brought about that. So you realize that, and you see, economic policies would always have time lags. He mentioned it. When you implement it, you don't expect it in a month or two. Sometimes you can have a minimum of 3, 6 thereabout. Then you can begin to see and monitor. Then you will know what to vary and what to do. And most policies, sometimes, every policy will have some adverse and some good. You weigh them. If the good outweigh the negative, you do. But you come with mitigative policies to also mitigate the other negatives. So the attempt to implement it, definitely the commitment should be there, and the commitment is there from the angle of the Bank of Ghana, within the Ministry of Finance, Trade, and other ministries, specifically sector ministers, that most of the recommendations impact directly. They are working on them. But then if we would say the speed, the rate at which they're going at it, we can comment and complain a little if it's a little slow. But there's a commitment to that. But as to whether the expectations will be met within this particular time, that's another thing. And obviously, you wouldn't expect everything to change over a period of time. And when you think about, especially
even when people say standards of living are high,
yes,
I mean, goods are expensive, services are skyrocketing.
The standards of living and then the pay and stuff. At one of the programs on this, I made a comment that people are paid not based on their needs, but on what they do. It's the productivity. We'll come back there. So if we want to go back to standard of living, then we have to get back to the basics, the level of production. That obviously will raise up whatever GDP that we'll use to measure some of those things. And then employment levels will come if production levels are high. So we'll get back to the economy and look at it as a whole. What are we doing regarding production? Our strengths, and if we are agrarian as Ghana, and one of the things I think strongly, that at the moment, if we want to get back to the drawing board, we should be looking at how we run the country. And it's more like Ghana is orchestrated to administrate and not to produce. So it's like success is in administration and not production. If you look at the country, people who are very successful, they've been in a chief executive somewhere, a politician somewhere. And there are few indigenous people who started from the scratch businesses and then put them up to a level. But how many of them? Now look at all those people we see the success figures. Where do they pick it from? It's in administration. And I think that's what we heard from the colonial administration. They set the agenda, and we don't seem to depart from it. I've listened to him severally. He came strongly on some of those things. I listened to you a lot. Strongly on those ones. So you realize, if we really want to, apart from all these that we put in place here, then we should really get back to very basic things of picking up this economy and increasing production.
Okay.
Now, and even if you talk about the currency, we're listening to him talking about now picking it to the yen.
Chinese yuan.
But you realize that what we go through is simply a demand and supply situation for the currency. Because since we privatize that sector and not strictly regulate it, it's the quantity. So what's the volume in the system? How do we even generate the foreign currency in the system to catch up with the demand for it? Of course, trade comes in. What are the volumes of exports against imports? Even when we export and import, what's the value of our exports? And what's the value of what we import? So if we even will send everything, what do we generate? How do we increase the quantity within the system? And then and also coming to issues of information management within that sector. Information is a very sensitive commodity. And if you don't, panic buying and stuff could hurt these things. And major players in that industry could create shortage and just to their advantage. What the monitoring system of the Bank of Ghana within the private units, within the foreign exchange community? These are some of the issues that also need to be checked.
Okay, in as much as we talk about Ghana's economy, what would be your direct answer, Sydney, to those who would say that, okay, we're done with Senchi, the recommendations are in, expectations, well, let's see how long it will take for implementations to come. What do you say to those who would say that, I mean, what do we do in terms of dealing with the various demands, you know, by way of the recent threats of strike actions? You can even talk about what's happening in town recently. I mean, currently, people have had to park their cars because those in charge of the fuel are saying that, look, give us some 150 billion Ghana cedis, you owe us, so we can be able to deal with this situation once and for all. So back to revenue. Does government have enough money to deal with some of these crises that we're facing?
No, government doesn't have enough money at all. This government is broke. Okay, government is broke, and the sooner they try and accept that they are broke, because they keep on denying that they are broke. They're like, you see, I am tired of hearing the word some challenges. We have a few challenges. It's a nice political way of saying you have a problem you can't solve. But I would much rather somebody take the bull by the horns and say, look, this is now getting out of hand. And this week is clearly a crisis. I don't remember the last time we ran out of petrol in this country. Do you remember? The last I remember was during the Achampong era. I don't remember. I wasn't here during the NPP time. So I don't know whether we had any such crisis.
You mean one that can be equated to what we're experiencing?
That we don't have fuel.
Fuel.
And we're having to queue up to buy petrol.
Right.
I drove around town today because I was at the tail end. I mean, I ignored the wake-up message that there will be a fuel shortage this week. And yet I was on a panel, a discussion panel, when the coordinator of the BDCs was actually saying that there's going to be a fuel shortage next week. And I ignored it. Only to wake up this morning, start my car and realize, look, I need some petrol. So I'm halfway into town and my reserve tank comes on. So I drove around for nearly an hour, finding a petrol station in the central Accra, around Adabraka area, where I could get some petrol. And there wasn't any. I ended up heading back home towards McCarthy Hill. And it was on the way to Kaswa that I found a station that seemed to be literally out of, you know, the dome path, which had some petrol. So I topped up and then headed back into town again. But I can't remember for the life of me the last time that we ever had to go and queue for petrol. And I think that we are hitting rock bottom, and we are trying to pretend that it's all going to be all right. And yet there are no clear means and no clear mechanisms in place that tells me that we are going to be all right. We have just shipped $3 million worth of cash on an airplane.
We'll get to that.
We'll talk about that.
We'll get to that.
I'm just touching on it as all the issues. We've shipped that off. We've done a Senchi, and we haven't had any concrete, implementations out of Senchi. I will say on record that I was promised, or I was told clearly by the Vice President in conversation, and this is a public conversation. I wasn't the only person there. But I was told in conversation that we would have the detailed report and that there would be a subsequent meeting with 140 participants where we would actually get into talking a lot more about our logic behind the 22 bulletin points. Now, we haven't seen that as of now. And I think last week he promised that it would be ready last week, and it wasn't, and we're into the next week. Sir.
And so what would that change? That I'll find out from you after the break. This is still PM Express here on Joy News. All right, welcome back. This is still PM Express here on Joy News on Multi TV. Well, it's not a funny matter. We're discussing Ghana's economy after this Senchi economic dialogue? Really, what is next? And my guest, Gilbert Ibrahim, he's an economist, and also Sydney Kesley-Hayford. He's also a financial analyst, and they are with us here in the studio. Now, before the break, Sydney, you were actually telling us about some discussions held earlier and the fact that some revelations will be made by way of the Senchi Consensus and a roadmap and a way forward.
Well, I don't know whether they are revelations, but what was suggested was that there would be a follow-up with the participants so that we could provide direct feedback of what actually guided the discussions,
right,
and what were the key issues, so we could express to the president how we felt about what went on and what we thought would be the right thing to do. So the big disappointment is that since we finished the Senchi Forum, we have not had this report that we all thought would come out into the media.
But really, what would change? I mean, this report, what would it change?
Well, it would help you in the media and other persons who have followed it to understand the logic behind the conclusion, because many people have said that, oh, but we know all about these issues. And the answer is yes. There really are no new solutions, because most of the solutions that we provided had already been discussed in the public media ages before. We only went there to reinforce the points that we thought we've been saying this and saying this and saying this and saying this. And Senchi was supposed to be an implementation, crystallization, that after we finished Senchi and we came out, my expectation, let me not talk for other participants, but my expectation was that there would be an opportunity now for government to take each issue and actually implement and implement and implement and implement. And even if you can't implement to the fullest, at least start a process of implementation, so that as we go forward, everybody will be clear that we are actually getting things done in a positive manner. See, we've got too many things hanging that are not being solved. And the more you do that, the more you leave all those things, the more critical the situation gets.
But what about you, Gilbert? Are you, the sense that I get listening to Sydney is that, look, he's disappointed at the fact that the report is not out. Are you disappointed as well?
Disappointed, I wouldn't say disappointed per se, but then I think the implementation is taking too long and it's slow. But as I said earlier, what I know is that most of the issues are broken down into groups and given to specific groups that it falls directly to meet and then look at the way forward regarding implementation. But then just the revelation I got here, the getting back to them to give the reason behind the bullet points. I think it's good, because you see, everybody will come to understand if the opportunity is given to the participants to really give the logic behind every situation. Everybody would understand. And when you have a entire public understanding a policy and knowing the challenge and the difficulty and the way forward, you think they can bear with you and absorb some of the shocks so that we can all move forward. And you agree with me that in Ghana, most of the successful...
But if this is what we need, so what then is making it so difficult
that's what I'm saying,
for government to release the report?
What I know is that most of the institutions are sitting on this. I don't know whether they want them to come up with their report regarding the way forward for implementation before they call all the participants to solicit their opinion, or they were supposed to do it before they ask the institutions to go with the implementation. I don't know which one comes first. But presently, what I know is that they have mandated the specific institutions that are supposed to work on each of the issues to work with. And some fall directly under ministry, some fall within, especially trade, and then the Ministry of Finance, obviously, and then the central bank in particular. So they are supposed to now speed up and push these things. You see, sometimes when even the challenges come, but you see the commitment at implementing some sound economic policies that gives you the hope that the situation will change in the future. Then today you're able to sacrifice, you're able to hold yourself and then give your all and support. But then in all these processes and all this implementation, one of the things I think is that all is not lost. And the country, at least, we are not totally off like it looks.
But when it appears, economic managers are failing to recognize the challenges by admitting that there are challenges, it becomes difficult for anyone sitting in the back to understand.
When you pick the individual
if there's any understanding at all.
individual level institutions and individual, sometimes some people at this time will come out openly and accept certain things and move. Some people are a bit resilient. They want to still absorb and move. Some want to be very optimistic that things will change as they go. It's not too easy to have a government just come throw in the towel and say, yes, this is the case. It's not that easy. But then, the commitment regarding how you would take certain policies, some of these suggestions, and some things, the pressure with which you want to implement them, you will see the commitment to produce change.
So Gilbert, what commitment do we want to see?
The commitment I see, the commitment I want to see, we want to see the institutions sit up. And the institutions are Ghanaians. And let's be honest, the president per se, or the vice, cannot leave their offices, walk to Bank of Ghana, and then chair and push them to do what they're supposed to do. I don't think Ghanaians expect the president to walk to the Minister of Finance and take over the job and stop. And you realize that
but there should be direction.
Yeah, the direction.
There should be monitoring.
You see, if you have worked with the public sector and you have dealt with civil servants and you're a public officer, you would understand the challenges that you face. One simple thing that you're supposed to use a day to fix sometimes will take a month. A document that will move to a desk and it would sometimes they can't trace it again. Where does it go? I don't know. And this is the case. You see, the entire, if you want to have these policies really go through, you can get honestly, you can get a government that will get all the right policies at cabinet level, at monetary level there. Now the implementation, remember, it's not the same politician. And we don't, don't you wonder why the corporate world is doing well, but the public world is not doing well? And sometimes you pick people from the corporate world and put them in the government sector, and it's like there's nothing they can do about it. And some of them get really frustrated because a simple thing in the corporate world, private sector that can just run through, you can trace it, monitoring and evaluation is cool. Here, it's not so. You have issues with the civil. So I think that to get these things through, the civil service, whoever is in charge, and yes, the president is there, but they have a head. They need to really sit up if this country will go. Because when the issues come, to be honest, one of the issues I realized that an issue to resolve water issue, which went through the system, at the end of the day, it was so frustrating. If you are somebody pursuing, you just give up. Meanwhile, these very people are also Ghanaians who will sit back again and complain. But I think that the entire Ghanaian system, Ghanaian populace, need to really have a rethink and maybe a little love for the country.
But gentlemen,
we'll solve a lot of things.
You're going to have to pardon my French at this particular moment. How wrong or right would anyone be if he or she is supposed to come to a conclusion that, look, the Senchi consensus died with the late P.V. Obeng? Sydney.
Let me say something very quickly. P.V. Obeng was very instrumental in coordinating what happened. He was very involved because of his National Planning Commission, role. But if anybody who says that this Senchi Forum is not movable or we cannot carry on because P.V. Obeng died, I don't want to use a very harsh word, but let me just say that they are totally, completely wrong. Because even though PV was pivotal, there were chairmen for every committee, and the chairmen were responsible for what happened in their committees. PV's job was to pull all the information together. Even at the point where he was supposed to do a presentation, he didn't do it. He asked one of his other junior officers to do the presentation because he needed them to get the exposure. So he was by no means running the show. This show was being run by the vice president. This was his thing. He virtually pushed it to happen. And having done so, it doesn't go away with PV Obeng. It won't even go away and cannot even go away if anything should happen to the vice president. Because every committee had a leader, and that leader had notes and made sure that we had rapporteurs who documented everything that we did.
And so as far as releasing the report is concerned, the onus lies on the Vice President to facilitate this.
Yes, it is his ultimate responsibility because he moved the whole program. He moved the whole forum. He chaired every session, every plenary session that we had. It was under his direction. In the committees, we had our chairman who variously coordinated, but we had strict timelines to deliver things. And we worked late into the night. Sometimes on one night we were up until about 2 o'clock in the morning just to be able to get a report out so we could deliver at the plenary. But this was clearly Vice President Emisa Arthur's baby, and he's responsible for it. And frankly, PV was co-opted into it, but it wasn't his role to birth or kill.
Gilbert, what will be your take on this?
All I say is that this is one of the oversimplification of very serious issues by people. People think, I mean, we all hold as opinion leaders in the society for whatever reason. You see, like seriously, people, when national issues come, I think, I don't know why, but today, deep within me, the nationalistic tendency and patriotism is so much in me. I mean, if this thing is really useless,
right?
It's obvious it was not a useless activity.
So your point is?
My point is, you don't come, if you didn't even participate at all, to oversimplify the whole thing,
right? Like
somebody did. That doesn't show love for the country you also want to contribute to build. And how can one person die and take a whole idea out when we are over 100 people within this community? I mean, what kind of logic is that?
All right. Now, this will be my final question to you before we go. We're looking at a chaotic situation here in the country. I mean, I don't know how
hashed that will be. You haven't noticed.
I don't even know.
Your tank is full.
I don't even know if my tank can take me back.
But check this, Gilbert and Sydney. I mean, we're talking about a situation where utility tariffs have been increased.
Yeah.
We're looking at a situation where traders are on strike. We're looking at a situation, strike, as in the Guta issue. We're looking at a situation where the fuel shortages in the country. And yet, we are able to airlift $3 million in cash to the Black Stars. Are we being prudent in terms of economic management? I'll start with you, Sydney.
Finish with me.
Well, Sydney, you don't want to take that. Okay.
Honestly, when you look at what's happening, sometimes it's not too. Let me start with the fuel. The bus community, yes, governments owing. And I heard the finance minister coming out, give them time to raise it, and then sometime, I don't know if you mentioned specific timelines that they would sort it out. It will be.
Sydney says we are broke.
Yeah, we are broke. That's why he asked for a little time to pay.
How long?
Now they are on strike. Whatever they have in their store is locked up there. The money is not coming, but it's locked up there.
Are you talking about Guta or are you talking about the Black Stars?
No, both. The fuel.
Oh, the fuel thing. Oh, okay.
You see, if they are not releasing it because they want to compel government to pay them, this is where we are.
I want you to link that to why we'll send $3 million.
Find it from? It's $900 million.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
100 million CDs.
So that's where I'm coming. So I don't see why. So why don't you engage? Release it. Definitely, at least one will go. It is only what they have is.
We are not releasing yet. We have $3 million to give to the Black Stars.
The
$3 million cash.
The fuel thing needs to be added. The people who are hoarding this thing are also Ghanaians. There's a huge hoarding.
But
there's no shortage. There's not like there's no fuel in the country.
Our time is up. So quickly, quickly address that.
You're talking about this, but why the fuel is not there? It's not because it is not there. Because if I heard a few people, they complain that they owe them. So they want to.
So are we being fair to the Ghanaian if we go on ahead and give $3 million cash to the Black Stars? Are we being economically?
You see, soccer has taken a place in the world.
Briefly on that quickly.
That it will be difficult for it's this same country that one particular tournament they complained that the government didn't release enough funds. We're in this country. I think MEP regime and then even. And they didn't give them enough money. That's why they didn't do well.
Right.
Now they just have to. But to be honest, to be honest, when you talk about prudence, when you talk about
we're out of time.
We're out of time. Sydney, right? Quickly, Sydney.
Really, there is a fuel shortage. There is a fuel shortage. There's no expectation of a price hike that people will want to hoard fuel so they can get
there's expectation. There's this rumor that by 1st July prices will go. It's not even a rumor. By 1st July prices will go up by 20%. Right. That's what's causing the hot.
Okay, Sydney, quickly.
I don't
30 seconds.
No. There's a fuel shortage.
Because it's being
giving $3 million.
If it is being hoarded or not being hoarded, I don't think that it is being hoarded.
Hold on, Gilbert.
That is just propaganda for
Sydney,
government.
your take quickly.
We have a fuel crisis. Government has a cash crisis. It cannot find 900 million cedis to pay to the bulk distribution companies to sort out their debts to them because it's cash strapped. And we have known that government is cash strapped since January of 2013. It's not like as if it's new. They've been hobbling and trying to cope and trying to manage. The borrowing is so high. Interest is killing them now. And they are trying to scratch around to find money. In the meantime, revenue generation is dropping.
Right.
And that's a problem. But you are able to find $3 million
and so you're
cash,
disappointed,
and
yes
then
or no?
you put it on an airplane. Illegally, because you cannot trade in dollars in this country, and all that surrounds it, and you come to tell me that we only have some small challenges. Well, we have it.
Obviously,
we have some critical issues to discuss.
Thank you very much, Sydney Kisley-Hayford and Gilbert Ibrahim. It's always a pleasure having you. And this discussion certainly will go on for a longer period of time, and until we get some solutions, obviously, we won't stop talking about it. But that'll be it for today's edition of PM Express. I am Prince Minka. Good night.